Welcome to the UN Brief. I'm your host, Maya Plentz. Today, we interviewed Guilherme Canela Godoy from UNESCO in Paris. He is responsible for the freedom of expression initiatives and the protection of journalists. We spoke about social media platforms and the challenges ahead for them to increase transparency. We also spoke about the upcoming General Assembly, UNESCO's biannual General Assembly, when every topic under the moon will be discussed regarding freedom of expression, social media platforms, regulatory measures, artificial intelligence, and much more. Thank you for watching the UN Brief, and don't forget to subscribe. We are funded by listeners like you. Today, the latest study you commissioned that asks for more transparency of technology companies, in particularly the ones that manage content, the social media platforms. And as you know, this week, Facebook had its time again on the spotlight for, unfortunately, the wrong reasons, with one of the former employees testifying to the US Senate that it needed to increase its transparency, precisely the topic that you have addressed in this study. Can you tell us a little bit more about how the study came about and what were the main points?
Sure. Thank you. And thank you for, again, having me with you. It's always a pleasure to speak with the UN Brief. Already during the World Press Freedom Conference this year, when the main topic of the conference was information as a public good, we have underlined that one key aspect of this discussion of information as a public good is precisely the issue of transparency of the internet companies. In May the 3rd, when the Vinduk Plus 30 declaration was endorsed and approved by the most stakeholder groups of delegates present at the Vinduk World Press Freedom Conference, we were mentioning three main factors important to this discussion on the challenges related to the current ecosystem, digital ecosystem environment, challenges related, for instance, on countering disinformation, misinformation, hate speech, and other issues. No, we were saying we need to qualify the demand, which means through education, through media and information literacy, empower citizens to have a critical relationship with this digital environment. We need to qualify the offer of information, the supply of information. Among other things, we need to empower you, journalists, to actually provide more and more professional and more qualified information to the public sphere, or qualify, for instance, empower fact checkers to do their job in fact checking what might be disinformation and misinformation. But only qualifying the demand and qualifying the supply is not enough. We need to discuss the transmission chain of this content. And this transmission chain is the IT companies, the internet companies, the social media companies. And to have this discussion, there is a precondition. And this precondition is transparency, because we only can discuss evidence-based policy in order to face these gigantic challenges we have if we have more data about what's going on. And to have more data about what's going on, we need to have more transparency. So at the end of the day, what we want more accountability of those companies. But for having more accountability, first, we need to have more transparency, and transparency in several areas. So to make a long story short, what UNESCO is inviting, UNESCO has launched a global invitation for all the stakeholders to discuss this issue, how we can improve the transparency of the companies. And we are having this discussion, including, of course, with them. So this policy brief you just mentioned, letting the sunshine, it's about this, how we can improve this digital ecosystem environment having more transparency.
One of the graphs you have in this policy advisory is that Facebook is the world's most used social platform with, at the present, 2.7 billion users, active accounts, right? So YouTube is second, then is WhatsApp, that's also owned by Facebook, and then fourth is Facebook Messenger. We are looking at these huge companies that have incredible power now, incredible lobbying power. So what are the challenges in terms of the United Nations and its specialized agencies into really engaging in dialogue and making these companies understand that they have to follow what they say. They say that they want to support democracy, but we have seen many cases where that didn't happen, actually the opposite. So how do you see is the way going forward? I know recently you had some meetings where Facebook was present. What were the discussions that you could entail, and are they understanding the importance of addressing these issues?
Well, I can't speak for them. What I can say is that when we first, I think they did engage with this process that UNESCO launched for discussing these transparency principles. They actually participated in the discussions in Windhoek at a high level from the companies, underlining that they also are worried about what's going on and they want to engage with this process. But from a UN specialized agency in charge of the freedom of expression discussions, we think more is necessary. So, for instance, if we look in the 26 high-level principles we are suggesting in this policy brief, I would call attention on one in particularly, that is the transparency about these companies' human rights risk assessments. So one of the important elements of transparency here is to understand the processes. So when they take a decision either to keep a content or to take down a content, whatever it is, how exactly they came to that decision. What was the human rights risk assessment they did to consider that a particular content is a content that should be protected by freedom of expression or should not be protected for freedom of expression. And why this is important? This is important because then whoever was involved with that particular decision to keep a content or to take down a content should know the reasons and should know the process, because this person, this individual, etc., also should have the right to appeal if he or she does not agree with the decision of the company. But this right of appealing should be an informed right. So they need to understand, and we also need to understand not only the individual cases, but on the aggregated cases, so that we can actually help the companies to face these challenges, because this is a global challenge. It's a challenge for all the society. And I must believe that the companies, as they are saying, they are also concerned about protecting and promoting democracies, about protecting and promoting human rights. But obviously, to do those things, we need to go through concrete actions. And those concrete actions should be a global discussion about how much regulation is needed, how much self-regulation is needed. But these policies, either if they are self-regulatory policies or they are regulatory policies, to be informed policies, we need to have transparency, because to suggest, as I said before, an evidence-based policy-making process in this area, first we need to understand the different angles of this problem. And right now, unfortunately, although I must say that these companies have evolved a lot in recent years in terms of their transparency policies, this is not enough for us, not only UNESCO, all the interested stakeholders to really participate in this discussion, aiming to suggest concrete solutions. And for us, obviously, needless to say, when we say solutions, the solutions is how we how we protect human rights, including freedom of expression, in these challenges.
And I see that in your report as well. You have mentioned that several of the companies already produce transparency reports. Twitter has increased the amount of information it makes available in its transparency center, for instance. Google is on its 10th year of producing transparency report. YouTube community guidelines enforcement report contains transparency data. And TikTok publishes information about its content moderation, algorithms, and privacy and security practices. Facebook's report deals with content removals, government requests for user data by country, intellectual property issues. But what is missing in terms of increasing this transparency besides the reports? They produce reports internally, everybody sees it, but management doesn't take action.
I mean, I think as I said, I think there is a lot that has been done in the past years, but there is a lot to be done yet. And I think there are several things not necessarily missing, but to be improved. One of them, as I already mentioned, is the transparency about the processes. We need to understand how exactly those processes are performed, and particularly because we have one thing that is the transparency about the content moderation. I mean, things that the users upload in those platforms. But we also need to understand the processes about content curation. Is that how the decisions that the platforms themselves take about content, which is different from the moderation of the content that is uploaded by the users. But we have specific discussions that are very important for democracy. We need more transparency, for instance, on how they deal with elections, when they are accepting or not, for instance, political advertisement. We need to understand better processes related to specific groups, for instance, children's issues. So the transparency on publishing, which is necessary, how many posts they haven't taken down, what are related to hate speech, etc. All those things are welcome and need to keep going, but we need to fine tune this. And some of those elements are already underlined in the principles we have published. And also it's very important to engage in this discussion, not only the companies that are the big ones. We need to engage all the different companies in this digital ecosystem in this discussion, and maybe those companies will have different approach to this issue, because it's not the same for a gigantic company to be related with this kind of discussions to when we are comparing to a medium size or a small size company. So as your viewers can see in the UNESCO policy brief, which by the way is available in all UNESCO 6 languages, actually is missing Chinese, but it will be uploaded soon. We are actually problematizing this kind of discussions. It's not the discussion of transparency is not a simple one. In principle, everyone is in favor of transparency. The thing is, what are the details about this discussion? So how we fine tuning this discussion about transparency?
What they do is already over and above what is required by law. So what do you see coming up? We have the General Assembly, UNESCO's General Assembly coming up in November.
On the 17th of November, we are going to launch the key findings of our World Trends Report on Freedom of Expression and Media Development, which will be live streaming by anyone that wants to follow it. And in this report, we are going to discuss some of these issues, including the issue of transparency of the companies, under the overall umbrella of the idea that journalism is a public good. And obviously this discussion about the digital ecosystem is very relevant to this overall debate about journalism as a public good, media viability. So when we are saying that media companies are suffering in terms of their economic viability, this has a connection with the development of the digital ecosystem, and therefore also a connection with the transparency of the companies in terms of advertisement, revenue, etc., etc. So this is the kind of discussions that we hope to stimulate with this global debate on transparency.
So you are inviting all the social media companies as well to participate in these discussions?
Yeah, they were actually all, or not all, those that wanted, they were consulted where in the initial phases of this process. Right now, we are producing a new document in terms of how those principles could be actually operationalized. So we are going to launch a new issue brief quite soon regarding the operationalization of these transparency principles.
And this policy brief on the operationalization is going to be published before the General Assembly?
Not necessarily, because we are still under consultations, but the other report, the key findings of the World Trends report, that one will be released during the General Conference.
Thank you. So the other question is, today we had very good news that the journalist that has been harassed, is a light word for what she went through, has received the Nobel Peace Prize. So do you have a commentary on that? Because I know you've been working very closely with her, and she participated in the last World Press Freedom Day.
Actually, Maria Ressa, during the last World Press Freedom Day, she was awarded with the UNESCO Guillermo Cano Global Press Freedom Award. No? So we are very happy that now these fantastic news were just released a few minutes ago. And the comment I have is actually to underline what the Norwegian Nobel Committee said while awarding today's Nobel Peace Prize. They said that they are convinced that freedom of expression and freedom of information are crucial prerequisites for democracy and protect against war and conflict. So I think it's obviously a prize to Mrs. Ressa and to Mr. and to Mr. Muratov, who also was awarded today. But aside that, I think it's an award for press freedom. It's an award for freedom of expression. The committee is underlining that we can't have peace if we don't have freedom of expression. And I think this is a very strong message.
Thank you for watching the UN Brief, and don't forget to subscribe. I'm your host, Maya Plants. We are funded by listeners like you. Thank you again, and don't forget to subscribe below to the UN Brief. And you can find us also at theunbrief.substack.com for our twice-a-week newsletters.